Okay, the first thing, this is Nancy Olson, and a couple of weeks ago I went to a training for the National Reporting System for WIOA. For those of you that are new to this subject, WIOA is the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and we are responsible for reporting under WIOA, starting with the program year we're in right now. I want to start this webinar by saying we do not have all the answers yet. I know that seems kind of strange since we started the program year July 1, but nevertheless, that is the case. We are working on moving forward and making sure that we have everything that we need set up to do the reporting for WIOA. However, I will also tell you that the Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education has said that they understand that there will be missing pieces of data for the first year. So they do not expect us to have everything in place by the time we report. There's also been a change in the reporting time frame. We used to report for the program year the following December. We now have to report in October. So lots to do here in the next several months. But again, don't panic about anything that you see. We will be working on what we need to do at the state level to support the local programs going forward to report under WIOA. Okay, to start with, one thing that has not changed is we report participants with at least 12 contact hours in the accountability measures. There is a term called reportable individual for those with less than 12 hours. During the training a couple of weeks ago, the question came up, how many hours less than 12 hours should be used as a point at which you would begin to report that person as a reportable individual. And the answer to that is that you should report that person as soon as you have the identifying information necessary to report that individual. That does not necessarily include the educational functioning level. So it could be someone with an hour. It could be somebody with 3 or 4 hours. But it would be at the time that you have identifying information for that individual. Again, the participant requirement of 12 hours has not changed. Program entry has not changed for our purposes. It is the date that a reportable individual enrolls in an adult education and family literacy program. It is not necessarily the date they receive 12 hours. It is the date that you obtain all of the identifying information. Program exit. It has changed a little bit. It is back to what you were familiar with in the past, and that is that the date of program exit is the last date of instruction. It also cannot be determined until at least 90 days have elapsed since the participant received services. Now for us, that means instruction. For other titles in the law, it means information only or self-service activities that could take place. But for us, it means instruction. So we have to wait at least 90 days, and then we enter the last date of instruction for the exit date. So I know that this is a change from what we just started doing about a year ago, but it is kind of back to what you were used to in the past, and that is that you put in the retroactive date for the last date of instruction. You cannot enter a date of exit immediately, regardless of what the student tells you. So if a student tells you they're not coming back, you still wait 90 days before you put in an exit date. And then again, the exit date is retroactive to the last date of instruction. That also includes if the student completes what their goals are for entering the program, you still have to wait 90 days.
Hi, Nancy. This is Mohan.
Yes, Mohan.
Okay.
Did you have a question, Mohan, or were you just letting us know you joined?
No, I just got in. I'm just letting you know that I'm here.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. The employment performance indicators. There's slight changes here, most of which are not going to affect what you do. The employment no longer is based on a cohort at entry. So there's not a cohort of those who enter unemployed and available, or unemployed, unavailable, or employed. There's no longer any cohort related to employment. The employment measures are the percentage of participants who are in unsubsidized employment during the second quarter after exit and during the fourth quarter after exit. Then we will also be looking at median earnings the second quarter after exit. The one exception to who is counted for the employment measures is those in a correctional institution and remaining in the correctional institution following exit from the adult education program.
Nancy?
Yes.
How will this affect the data validation checklist?
We'll have to take a look at that and see what we need to change, but there will definitely be things that we have to change before the October date for data validation.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. So again, there are no cohorts for the employment measures. However, those that are incarcerated and remain incarcerated following exit will not be counted in the employment measures. So for those of you serving a large number of incarcerated individuals, this is a good thing for you. Okay. The next measure is credential attainment. That includes a recognized post-secondary credential or a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent during participation or within 1 year after exit from the program. We will be working on follow-up and data match for the post-secondary credential. We're looking at the policies to do with when Pablo closes and whether or not we need to make a change to that. So I'm working closely with our data research and planning folks to bring the policies related to Pablo and Pablo itself up to what we need for the WIOA reporting. But it will take a while. We expect it to take, I'd say, the majority of this year. The definition for Title II for credential attainment includes those people that get their GED or a post-secondary credential within enrollment or 1 year after exit from the program. Now, you might remember that there was a condition under which the secondary school diploma would be counted. And one of those things is this bottom bullet, the post-secondary attainment measure. No, I'm sorry. It's the next slide. Okay. The secondary credential attainment measure is limited to those individuals that are either employed or enrolled in post-secondary education within a year following exit. They've also added that the secondary credential attainment measure is limited to participants who exit and begin the program year at or above the 9th grade level. Now, before you get upset about this, this was the only way they could limit it at all. So this was a compromise with labor to limit at all who would be counted in this measure. There's also some good news coming in a few slides later, okay? So before you panic about this, hold off until I get through the next few slides, okay? So for the secondary credential attainment measure, it will be limited to those in levels 5 and 6 and those for post-secondary education attainment is limited to those that were enrolled in a post-secondary education or training program while enrolled in adult education. So for our purposes right now, that pretty much means accelerating opportunity. Okay? So again, secondary credential attainment is limited to those at 9th grade or above. And post-secondary education attainment measure is limited to those participants who were enrolled in a post-secondary education or training program while enrolled in adult education. Okay, the measurable skill gain indicator includes the percentage of participants who during the program year are in an education training program that leads to a post-secondary credential or employment and who are achieving measurable skill gains. Now, there are several ways of achieving a measurable skill gain. Only 2 of those apply to Title II adult education. There was a great deal of comments that were submitted complaining about the fact that we in Title II were limited to the number of ways that we could meet a measurable skill gain indicator. The last information collection request and the final guidance did make some adjustments to this. So this is probably the biggest change that you will see, at least so far. So the measurable skill gains for Title II include what we've always considered an educational functioning level gain, but it also includes achieving a secondary diploma or its equivalent. In our case, it's equivalent. So again, a measurable skill gain includes the educational functioning level gains and the GED. regardless of entry level. So I expect to hear, whooping and hollering at this point, because I believe that's really, really good news for us. Okay. The educational functioning level gain includes 3 possible ways of obtaining an educational functioning level gain. The pre and post testing that we're used to, completion of Carnegie units. In other words, if we were a state that had a high school diploma completion program for adult education, we would be able to count completion of Carnegie units. We do not at this point in time, and I don't foresee us moving in that direction, but that is one of the 3 ways that we could obtain an educational functioning level gain in Title II throughout the country. The third is program exit with entry into post-secondary education following exit. Now that is only within the program year. So our normal follow-up for post-secondary education, where the person exits and then enrolls in post-secondary education following exit, this would apply for an educational functioning level gain if it is still within the program year. So an example of this would be someone that exits in December. Maybe they have been a part of Accelerating Opportunity and they enroll in further courses in January following their exit from adult education. It would count as an educational functioning level gain. I've got a second slide that I put together to try to help put this in perspective. This is the text of what I just said, so you can read through that as you wish. But the other thing I did was to put this in a picture that I think helps, because the measurable skill gain is the overall. And then the options within the educational functioning level gain are a subset of the measurable skill gain, as well as the high school equivalency credential being a subset of the measurable skill gain. So you've got measurable skill gain, and then within that, you've got the educational functioning level or the high school equivalency. And then taking that down further, within the educational functioning level, you've got 3 options. Again, we do not use the high school credit completion option. Questions about this before we move on? This is a big change.
Nancy, it's Rosemary, and I have a question. So this means that earning their high school equivalency is not a separate outcome. It's just part of the measurable skill gain.
The only time it would be a separate outcome in addition to the measurable skill gain would be if they are employed or enrolled in post-secondary education within 1 year following exit. So it could count for both.
But like, for instance, our students that come in and they're level 4 and then they pass the GED test, we still get a measurable skill gain, and in the past we didn't.
Correct. Correct. That's the really good news.
Okay. Okay.
I mean,
all right. Then I understand that part.
Great.
Nancy, I may not. It's Kelly.
Okay, Kelly.
Could you, I'm visual, could you, as far as GED relates to the employment post-secondary, state it one more time for me?
Sure. The GED credential counts for the credential attainment measure only if, one, the individual is at a level 5 or 6, and two, the individual is employed or enrolled in post-secondary education within 1 year following exit. So that's when it would count as a credential attainment.
So they have to be entered upon entry of 5 or 6. They have to be employed at the time of GED testing.
No.
Or they have to be enrolled within 1 year.
They have to be employed within 1 year
Okay.
of passing the GED, or enrolled in post-secondary within 1 year of passing the GED for the credential attainment. For the measurable skill gain, there are no additional requirements.
So
Now,
based on the date of the GED test, not the date of exit?
for the measurable skill gain, it's not based on exit at all, but for the credential attainment, it is based on exit.
Okay.
So let me go back here.
Because they'll look at employment or
Yeah.
PSC 1 year from the test. Okay.
Okay?
It's Monday morning and I haven't had enough caffeine.
No, that's okay. I understand.
Thank you.
Believe me, I understand. Okay.
Nancy, this is Debbie.
Yeah.
Would you say that one more time? Is it 1 year after their exit date or 1 year after their GED date?
It is within 1 year of their exit date. For the credential attainment, be it high school equivalency or post-secondary, it is within 1 year from their exit date that they are employed or enrolled in post-secondary education. For the measurable skill gain, it does not rely on an exit. It does not rely on educational functioning level, entry level. Now, one thing that is still true is that if you get a measurable skill gain based on the high school equivalency, you do not also count post-testing. It's either or. And it's the most recent one at the time of reporting.
So, Nancy, it's Karen. I've got a question for you. If a person's in the AOK program, they're at level 5 and 6.
Yes.
They're enrolled in post-secondary ed prior to exiting the program. Does that count?
It does not. I specifically asked about co-enrollment at the training that I was at 2 weeks ago. And unfortunately, the answer that I got was not one that made me happy.
Because we've been doing all this AOK stuff for years now, and now it's not going to count for anything?
Well, it will still count for the state. It never did count for the federal measure. It never, I mean, only after exit counted for the federal measure ever, and that hasn't changed, unfortunately. I had hoped that the idea of a state measure and a federal measure would not be an issue with the change, but unfortunately, it's not. It hasn't changed.
Nancy, this is
Okay,
Rebecca.
thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question on that? In your example a minute ago, you said, or a few minutes ago, you said a person in AO and then they complete adult ed and they enroll in further courses, they would count for enrolling in PSE.
Yes, for the credential attainment, that is correct. And for the measurable skill gain, that is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, in both cases.
So I'm a little confused about what your answer to what Karen just said in that. They
can't be simply co-enrolled. They have to enroll in post-secondary education following exit. So if they exited from adult education when they were in accelerating opportunity and they exited from adult education, but they did not continue in post-secondary education, they would not count in either place.
So they just have to take additional classes beyond the AO class they were in at the time of exiting adult ed.
Yes, correct.
Gotcha.
Other questions?
But that's at the federal level, right?
That is at the federal level. When it comes to post-secondary enrollment at the state level, we would still count co-enrollment under any circumstances.
So I'm looking at the big picture here. So as a program, it doesn't necessarily affect our program, but as a state, that could affect our funding.
Yes, I mean, it's possible if we do not, the first 2 years under WIOA, we do not have targets other than the measurable skill gain. We are in a baseline setting mode for the first 2 years for the other measures. So when it comes to the credential attainment, which remember, the credential attainment measure is different than the measurable skill gain. Okay, so for the credential attainment measure, we will have 2 years to set a baseline before setting a target. For the measurable skill gain, we already have a target. And I think even if all we had to go on were pre and post testing, we could meet that target. But ultimately, yes, it could have an impact.
Okay, so what do we do with the people, and this has been my question for 2 years now, what do we do with the people that are coming into our program that already, for the measurable skill indicator, what do we do with the people that already have a high school diploma for this one? Because ed gain is part of it, but then achieving a secondary diploma or its equivalency, what do we do with those people?
It would still be pre and post testing. And then in addition to that, we do have the enrolling in post-secondary education following exit as an option. So we still have, I mean, we actually have more options than we've had in the past for a measurable skill gain for those individuals.
Are you saying and or though with all this?
I'm saying or.
Okay, because I had and underlined. So it's the ed gain and the GED or post-secondary ed.
No, it's ed gain for measurable skill gain only. It's ed gain or GED. Now, and this is, it gets more complicated, okay? I hate to say it, but it does. So hold that question for a minute, okay?
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Nancy?
Yes.
Nancy, maybe you asked her to hold that question. Let me try this way. Once in a while, we get students who come with the high school diploma from their country, but they are not ready to go to post-secondary. So we enroll them and we brush them up their English and other skills, and they probably get based on pre and post testing, they get an educational gain here, and they have a goal to go to post-secondary, and we enroll them in either WATC or Butler Community College. Is that a process that is acceptable?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And when they enroll in the community college or WATC, after exiting from here, so we get the enrollment in post-secondary education gain also?
Let me go on. Hold that for a minute. Okay.
Okay.
That's what I meant by hold it for a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Let me move on and hopefully it will make a little more sense.
Okay.
Okay. So the reason that I'm hesitant to answer that is because of a brand new thing for us called periods of participation. And this is one of those things that will likely make your head spin. However, we are looking at how to accomplish this in Pablo. So for the time being, you do not need to do anything different for this until you hear more from us on how this will be handled in Pablo. There's not anything you can do on your end to track this. But what the reporting requires now is that we look at participants based on periods of participation. And a period of participation is counted each time a participant exits the program and re-enters the program during the same program year. Here's the federal diagram to look at periods of participation. I looked at this and didn't think that it made a whole lot of sense. It talks about the period of participation 1, you have program entry, you have program exit, you're looking at a measurable skill gain, and you're looking at follow-up for the exit-based measures. Then you have a second period of participation with program entry and program exit, and you are again looking at a measurable skill gain and a follow-up for exit-based measures. So the reason that I hesitated about talking about the and versus the or is within one period of participation, it would be or between a GED and a pre and post test. It would be whichever one was the latest during that period of participation. So only one would count for that period of participation. Then, with a second period of participation, an additional one would count. So for instance, if you had pre and post testing during the first period of participation, you could have a measurable skill gain based on that pre and post testing during the first period of participation. Then the second period of participation, let's say that the individual obtained their GED. You could count that GED as a measurable skill gain during this second period of participation. Okay? Then the third period of participation, you can have post-secondary education as a measurable skill gain. So you can actually have 3 measurable skill gains for one individual if they had 3 periods of participation. So,
Rosemary again, could you have two educational levels? Like, for instance, they come in at a level 3, and then they go to a level 4, and then they come back in a couple months later, and they go from a level 4 to a level 5.
You could have 2 educational functioning level gains for different periods of participation, yes. Now, my biggest concern, well, no, I have many, but one of my initial concerns was about an entry level changing. And what they said was that the entry level reported for that individual would be upon entry. So it would not change with multiple periods of participation. There will be further training at the federal level, and then I will do further training at the local level, or at the state level to get this to the point where we all understand it. I worked on a chart that I thought might make it a little bit more clear. So here's an example of one individual student with 2 periods, actually 3 periods of participation, but only, but only only 2 exits. So, for instance, the student starts in July, attends until August, does not attend in September, October, or November. You would go back and put the exit date in August. They show back up for their New Year's resolution in January. They again attend about a month. They do not attend in March, April, or May. You go back in February and put in another exit. And then maybe they even show up again in June. Okay? They would have actually 3 periods of participation, 2 of them with exits. So the measurable skill gain would be tracked for all 3, and the exit-based outcomes would be tracked for the 2 exit quarters. Does that help at all? Or does it just muddy the water more?
So so they have the same entry level for the whole year, but if they get an educational outcome in the first period of participation and another one in the second, can you count both of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's my understanding so far.
Yeah, we could never do that before, so.
I know. And the periods of participation, I think there's a lot that we don't know yet. So until some of the finer points get worked out at the federal level, I've got training that I should be in either late September or early October. So once I go through that additional training, they're supposed to have some of the finer points worked out by that time.
Nancy, this is Rebecca. Are the hours cumulative for purposes of getting to enough hours to test between these different periods of participation?
I do not believe so. I believe that the clock would start over.
Oh my gosh.
Well, because you're talking about an additional post-test, I believe it would. Those are some of the questions that we don't have exact answers to. But based on what I know so far, I believe that the hours would be based on during that period of participation.
Nancy?
Yes.
This is Debbie. What if during the first period of participation they only had 20 hours or so, and then when they come back, you don't build on that? You have to start over?
Because if they come back in If they come back during the period where you still have a valid pretest, then yes, you could build on those hours that they already had. But if you're starting with a previous post-test, then it would be just like any other time when you post-test a second time. So, I mean, just like now, when you post-test a second time, there has to be at least 40 hours between the post-tests.
No, the way I'm thinking is like she asked. Suppose he starts in July, and he builds up, say, 25 hours, and leaves in August,
Right.
September, October, November, and he comes back in January, and then has, say, 30 hours.
Mhm.
We, at our local level, we establish in the mornings they need minimum 57 hours to take a post-test. So July he comes and 25 hours, and January he comes back and say builds up 25 hours. So we add them up, and he can take a post-test?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
that has not changed.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And actually, when we're talking about post-testing more than once, that really hasn't changed. I mean, we've always required the appropriate number of hours between two post-tests. So that really has not changed. I know it sounds worse because what I'm saying is the clock starts over, but I'm saying the clock only starts over if there was a post-test during the first period of participation.
July, he comes in July and quits in August. I don't know how a student will build. It's not impossible, particularly during daytime student. He needs to, between July and August, he quits. He needs to establish about 57 hours to take a post-test and a gain. And
right.
I'm referring to getting multiple gains for the same student. Then he comes back in January, and well, it may be possible, but he or she needs to establish enough hours to take multiple post-tests and get multiple gains.
And it won't be very common, I don't believe.
Right.
I don't believe it'll be very common that somebody will have a post-test, have a level gain, come back in, have enough hours to take another post-test. I don't think that will be common. I don't even think that it would be that common that we have students with multiple periods of participation. I mean, it happens absolutely for sure, but I don't think we're looking at a huge number of students.
Okay.
I mean, you guys tell me, do you think more than 10% of your students actually would have more than one period of participation?
I don't know. All I know is these people quitting after 20, 25 hours and sometimes not even coming back is really hurting. I don't know. It may not be only for our program. Many programs may experience this lack of retention.
Right. Absolutely. And this, I'm not expecting that everyone will walk away from this webinar with a full understanding of this. I'm still working on understanding it myself and getting answers from the federal level. Like I said, there's an additional training that will go more in depth. And we're going to have, we're going to take this next year to really fully understand this.
Hey, Nancy, this is Chris Stanier.
Yeah, Chris.
Just one quick question, and if you don't know, that's fine, or it might be something to pass on to the feds when you're chatting with them about this. But I was curious how the period of participation would interact with that 90-day rule around the student exit. So if a student exits, we wouldn't count it as a new period of participation until 90 days after that exit. Is that correct?
Because you are going back retroactive to enter the exit date, it could be, it could end up, if I'm the student and I am out for 90 days, you exit them, they come back, that's reentry. If I'm not out for 90 days, you don't exit me. And so if I come back 75 days later, it's not a new period of participation because I was never exited.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay. And again,
Nancy?
yes.
I'm sorry, Nancy. This second training that you are talking about, is it possible to have instead of a webinar, to have the other training on face-to-face training?
Actually, because of the timing of the federal training, I think a big portion of our October meeting will be devoted to this. So yes, I think that probably we would do face-to-face. And I can't remember where our October meeting is. Oh, it's Salina. So we could probably have like the first day devoted, or part of the first day devoted to this if you wanted to have additional staff join us.
And all these people that have been asking questions get to present.
Sure. You don't
Not
want
me.
to. Yeah, you don't want to. But yeah, I'm.
What do you mean by present? We need to. I have asked.
Hold on, you are the man. You get to go home, study all this, and work with Nancy and present on WIOA.
Oh, I know present.
I'm nominating you.
I know present. I know speak English.
Listen. Oh, good one.
Oh, wow. Is this English? I don't think it is.
Yeah, this is WIOA. It's not English. Okay. Well, I know this is about as clear as mud, but I'm still going to move on, okay? So I sent out the reporting tables to you, and I don't want to go too much in depth with these because, again, we're going to find out more and more as the next few months go on. But the one thing, a couple things that I did want to point out on the reporting tables. One is that the feds have taken off the descriptors for the educational functioning levels, but there is not any change in the levels yet. It will be probably at least 2 years before there's any change in the levels, but they're taking off those descriptors like intermediate low, intermediate high. They're taking those off in preparation for that. So the feds are using levels 1 through 6 for ABE and levels 1 through 6 for ESL. We will not change from using levels 1 through 12. So just in case you were questioning the tables that I sent out, I wanted to mention it to you, okay? Then on table 2, and these are all federal reporting tables, the one change that I wanted to point out is that they are splitting the age group 45 to 59 into 2 age groups. You won't have to do anything differently. You've never had to group your students in Pablo. When we pull the data from Pablo, we group it. But again, I just want to point out that that change has been made.
Why?
There was no explanation. Susan Simons asked why, and there was no explanation as to why. I think it maybe had to do with um, a little bit older adults, and I kind of resent that since I fall into that age group almost, but a little bit older adults, and maybe the demographics of those participating in adult education as far as employment and all that. But I don't really know the whys. Then table 3. On table 3, we've always reported adult basic education, adult secondary education, and English as a second language. We are now having to report those 3 categories and a separate integrated English literacy and civics education category. In addition to that, we are also reporting subsets of those participating in integrated education and training from those categories. Now, what this means is it is especially important that you mark correctly those students in integrated English literacy and civics education for only the 6 programs that obtain funds through English literacy and civics education. So only those 6 programs should mark students as English literacy and civics education. This is the first time that we have had a count in the federal report for integrated English literacy and civics education, or English literacy and civics education, period, separate from the English as a second language group. It's always been English as a second language always included the English literacy and civics education students. That is not the case in this report now. Those students are reported separately. They are no longer a subset of the English as a second language students, listed here on the report as English language acquisition. Again, let me stress that that means that it is crucial that all of your English literacy and civics education students be marked appropriately in Pablo. Questions
We are
about
already doing it, Nancy.
Huh?
We are already doing this for these people. There are 2 places we mark ELCE students already. We have been doing this.
I know. I just want to make sure that everybody is
I see. Okay.
appropriately. I know you're
Okay,
already
okay.
doing it, but it's just even more important that,
Okay.
that it be marked
Okay.
correctly. Okay? Okay. Table 4. Table 4 is, you can compare it to our student report C2 with a complete learning gains. However, this is where those with an educational functioning level or obtaining a secondary school diploma would be indicated. So if you look at the columns, you've got B equals the total enrolled, C the attendance hours, D the number with an educational functioning level gain, E the number with a secondary school diploma or its equivalent. Okay, D and E are an or, not an and. Okay, so if I take D plus E plus F plus G, I equal B. So it's an unduplicated count between D, E, F, and G. Okay, let me repeat that. B equals D plus E plus F plus G. Then, starting with I report the total numbers of periods of participation And J is the total number of periods of participation with measurable skill gains. That's where the duplication comes in. So if I got an educational functioning level gain and my GED in 2 separate periods of participation, that's where it would count in J. Now, you have no way in Pablo yet to track periods of participation. So all of this is in preparation for the time period when that happens. You will not be able to track periods of participation until there are changes in Pablo that allow that. So we're just beginning to build the understanding and then eventually the reporting. Questions about that? Lots and lots of questions about that, probably.
Nancy, would you please repeat again the B equals whatever?
Okay. B equals D plus E plus F plus G. So each individual participant is going to be counted once in D or E or F or G. It's not until column I that you would have a participant possibly count more than once. And one thing with the tables that I sent out, if you really want to get a better understanding of these tables, the best thing to do is to read through the text that follows the table. This is where you find the real detail to the table. So if you, oh, shoot, sorry about that. Okay. If you look, can you guys see my cursor? Apparently not.
I can't see your cursor now.
Okay. All right. Well, the D plus E plus F plus G is down here on the 6th bullet. So the text that follows the table is where you really find the details. Okay? Table 4B has not changed. That's where we record the number pre and post testing. We do very well in this. The feds pretty much say that the target should be at least 50%. We are always well above 50%. Okay, but there's not been a change in this table. Table 4C is the table for distance ed participants. They are a subset of table 4. So in other words, distance ed, they would show up in table 4 and then again in their own table. And then table 5. One of the things that we are going to be doing at the state level for the data match for periods of participation, once we're able to identify the periods of participation, we will have to do the data match looking at not just the second quarter after exit for the overall, but the second quarter after exit for the periods of participation. So a student could be counted in column F for multiples because they are employed the second quarter after exit for both periods of participation. Again, that's one of those things that I'm sure we will get more details on and provide you with more details. But the main thing is for you to know that we will be doing the data matching and you won't have to worry about it. Okay. This is also where the median earnings that we've never reported before will be reported. And then the attained a secondary school diploma or recognized equivalent and enrolled in post-secondary education or training within 1 year of exit, or attained a secondary school diploma or recognized equivalent and employed within 1 year of exit is counted. And then also attained a post-secondary credential while enrolled or within 1 year of exit. This is the only place where co-enrollment in post-secondary education will count, but it only counts if a credential is obtained. And we have gotten some information on what that credential should be, but I anticipate more information on the credential because industry recognized credentials have not been really well defined yet. But at least this would give us one place to count co-enrollments if in fact they obtain a secondary credential or a post-secondary credential, excuse me. Again, the best information on Table 5 is right here in the text. It gives you what each column should contain and a little bit more definition. Table 6 is where we have always recorded those employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force. We will still record those employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force, but we will also be adding a new category of employed but received notice of termination of employment or military separation is pending. I don't anticipate that we're going to get very many people that military separation is pending, but we could get a number of people that have received notice of termination of employment. There are no other changes on this table. Again, the text for Table 6 gives you a little bit more detail and definition. And Table 7, this is a table that you guys don't really see. The numbers that we pull are based on your staffing in Pablo. One reason why I want to show this table is because the local administrative staff or ancillary services, which includes support staff, counselors, paraprofessionals, is an unduplicated count by function and job status. That's different than the reported number for teachers. So the reported number for teachers is a number of teachers that have taught through that program year, regardless of whether or not they remain in your program teaching. But the support staff, the administrative staff, That is based on the function and job status. And what we're going to have to do is define that a little bit better in Pablo. And then what we pull for the report will be a little different than what we've done in the past. And finally, questions.
Nancy?
Yes.
In some other context, you answered me about a couple of students. For example, in FY 16, we could not mark them as the ELCE educational gains, and you said you could not do that because they already made an educational gain in FY 15. So
For citizenship. Right.
Citizenship, yes. So do I understand that if a student gets a citizenship gain in a particular FY, let's say previous year, he cannot get a citizenship gain anymore, and we don't have to test him for citizenship gain? Okay, let me clarify. Suppose a student gets an educational gain in FY 16, for example. So we don't have to test him for citizenship gain in FY 17 anymore, and even if he passes that test, he won't get that citizenship gain in FY 17 because he already...
Only for citizenship, that is correct.
Oh, okay.
Only for citizenship.
So for citizenship purposes, a student will get gain only once, but no more anymore, right?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And again, I don't expect you to walk away from this with all your questions answered. We'll do the best that we can. And as I get more information, I will answer more questions and provide more training.
Okay. I am participating in this webinar through phone. Pretty soon I'm going to install a latest computer, and we will be able to participate in a different way. Can you please send the PowerPoints?
I did that this morning at the start of the webinar, so you should have it in your email.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Wow. They're all very smart, Nancy. My head is reeling and reeling, but they seems to be understanding everything.
I think they're just not expecting to understand everything, which is fine.
It's a lot to absorb in one setting.
It is. It is. And it's, you know, there's some significant differences there. I basically wanted to give you a preview and give you kind of a heads up on some of the things that will be coming down the road. But I don't expect everyone to have a good grasp on it yet. But we'll get there. Okay, as always, you certainly can send me an email or call with questions. Again, we'll do more training coming up this fall, and we'll see you in